All right, it looks like it is noon here, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us for our Money Counts webinar. Today, we are going to be talking about student loans, the borrowing process, repayment plan options, as well as ways to work towards student loan forgiveness. So if you are stressed about your student loans, you've come to the right place. This is going to be a really informative webinar today. And the more you know about your student loans, the more control you have over them, right? Knowledge is power. So before we get started, I just want to take a minute to introduce the team we've got here. My name is Allie Smith. I'm a specialist at Penn State's Sokolov-Miller Family Financial and Life Skills Center. I am joined by Carlo. He is one of our financial literacy ambassadors, and I'll go ahead and let Carlo introduce himself here.
Hello, everyone. As Ali said, my name is Carlo. I'm a student ambassador here at the center. I'm a senior here at Penn State. I'm majoring in advertising. I'm part of clubs like SFO, the Film Work here, and RAM, which is a freestyle dance group. So hello, everyone. It's fantastic to meet you.
Awesome. Thank you, Carlo. On our chat today, we have Jackie, who is also one of our financial literacy ambassadors. It looks like he just put a little welcome message in there for you all. And he'll be putting some helpful links and resources in the chat throughout today's webinar. So you can ask questions via the chat or the Q&A feature. We will address questions at the end. So before we get started, we have a few poll questions for you to kind of get to know you and maybe where you're at and how you're feeling about your student loans. So I'm going to go ahead and share those. We've got 4 questions here. Don't get overwhelmed, just 4 questions. We would love to know, what is your class standing or your current status? If you've completed your 2023-2024 FAFSA, if you've taken out any kind of loan in the past, and we do just want to say, like, all of your answers for these polls are confidential. We won't know who's saying what. We just kind of want to get an idea of who our audience is this afternoon. And our last question is if you feel nervous engaging in conversation with the Office of Student Aid. It looks like we have a good mix of different people in our audience. A lot of Penn State parents. Welcome. Thanks for coming today. Lots of us have taken out loans in the past, and only some of us feel nervous talking to student aid. So that's good news. Thank you everyone for participating in our poll. Again, welcome. We are so glad to have you here today. We're going to go ahead and dive right in.
Hello, everyone. As Ali previously said, this is our presentation on student loans. This is part of our Money Count series, which basically just summed up is just get a little bite-sized bit, get the baseline of everything that you need to know around any given topic, whether that be student loans, budgeting, financial literacy in general. The Money Count series is a fantastic resource to just sort of get a general baseline instead of having to go from website to website, hopping through and trying to figure out, oh, what do I need? What does this mean? Money Counts series is basically just a way to go, here's all the basics that you really need to know. And we're, as previously stated, we're part of this really long name of a title. Basically, our center is just the Financial Literacy Center. We're here to help you just figure out what to do with your personal finances, what to do in general, what questions you have. And here are the variety of services that we offer. One of the major ones being our one-on-one appointments. These are booked via Starfish. And whether you have a specific question about student loans or have a more general question about credit cards, financial literacy in general, this is a fantastic resource to just get a personalized feedback and personalized advice to be like, hey, what is this? What can I do? What are my options? So this is a fantastic resource just to get something personalized to you and your specific scenario. In addition to that, we also serve group presentations and webinars. As you know, we're at a webinar currently. They're very similar. Our group presentations are very similar to that, whether that be in person or virtual. These would be done to classes and other orgs here on Penn State. So we also have student self-study modules, which basically just serve, if you don't feel like reading through, you just want to, if you don't feel like watching a webinar, watching a YouTube video, self-study modules serve as a great resource to just be like, hey, I want to read all the information that I need. And then if you have any questions, feel free to book another one-on-one appointment. In addition to that, we also have a mentoring program. This is where we pair you up with alumni of Penn State in your field or industry that you want to go into in the future. And you basically just talk to them. It's not just specifically about personal finance or financial literacy. It can literally just be like, hey, I'm thinking about taking this class. I want to do this in the future. Do you think this is worth it? I know that that's what my experience was like with my mentor, where I basically just talked to them and basically went, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, X, Y, Z, or the other. Do you think this is a good path for me? Or what are the pitfalls that I might fall into when applying to jobs? Things like that. So that's another great resource we have available for completely free. And a new service we offer this semester is workshops. These are very similar to our group presentations and webinars, except they're a lot more hands-on. So an example of this would be after the workshop, budgeting. You would have a full-on budget, you'd have a plan for the next month, and you'd know what to do after that. Or you'd have, you see your credit report, you'd have that in your hands, and you know, okay, what do all of these different things really mean? So that's sort of the gist of all the services we offer. Feel free to ask any more questions after the presentation and during the presentation about how we can help you guys specifically. So now let's sort of move on to sort of what the meat and potatoes of this presentation really is about student loans, and start acknowledging the fact that it is something that most of us dread talking about, some have to deal with. I just got to go, okay, what can we do? What can we do to figure this out? How can we help mitigate that? One of the main ways being student aid and financial aid, things like that. But it's a little hard to talk about. So I'll give you guys a second to just sort of read through, sort of figure out, do you feel the same way? Is your feelings similar? And then we have a short TikTok to describe what my thought on financial aid was when I first came to Penn State.
I'm not going to scream. But why is financial aid so confusing?
So if you felt very similar to that TikTok, feel free to talk amongst yourselves in the chat. I know that's how I felt before working here at the center, of just being like, what is this? What do I do? What are all these things? And that's sort of what we here as a center are able to help walk you through and help figure out, okay, what can I do to help give myself the highest chance of mitigating the most student loan debt as possible? So let's start working into the first step. One of them is just budgeting for college. The reason this is so important is just figuring out, okay, how much am I actually going to have to pay for college? That's such an important factor. And it's a little bit different than budgeting if we were working full time and working in industry. One of the biggest differences with budgeting for college and budgeting for real life is just having to stretch out that money for a longer period of time, as we have to stretch it out semester to semester versus month to month. So one of the first steps towards budgeting for college is just completing your FAFSA. This opens October 1st every year. And the reason you want to complete your FAFSA every single year is just don't turn down any free money. You want to make sure that you're not leaving any free money left on the table. So that's one of the biggest factors to just biggest reasons for just completing your FAFSA, making sure that you're not leaving any money on the table, making sure that you're giving yourself the highest chance possible to mitigate student loan debt, to make sure that you are mitigating the cost of college in general. After you've completed your FAFSA, it's time to start figuring out, okay, how much will I actually owe? How much will I have to pay? So that's when you start looking at the PSU net price calculator. You start putting in all the specifics of, you start putting a general gist of, oh, am I going to be living on campus? What campus am I going to? Things like that. And you start getting you get a price to be like, okay, this is the ballpark range of what I will be paying semester to semester, year to year. So after you've completed your FAFSA, once you've got a general gist of everything else, that's when you start looking at, okay, what are the ways that I can mitigate the cost of college as much as possible? So that's when you start looking into grants, scholarships, work studies, loans, personal funds. And for grants and for scholarships specifically, this is not just a complete, this is not a GPA race. Some of the scholarships are literally just, oh, I'm left-handed. Oh, I really like to draw. Oh, I like to do X, Y, Z, or the other. One of the most interesting scholarships that I applied to was literally just, if the zombie apocalypse was to happen right now, what would your game plan be? What would you do? And that was for $100. So I know it may be tedious, I know it may be kind of annoying, but if you think about it like this, where you apply to 3 scholarships within the hour and you only end up getting one of them for $100, you spent 1 hour of labor, 1 hour of work to get $100 completely tax-free. That is a fantastic job to have. And that's why it's so important to continue to look at grants, to continue to apply to scholarships, making sure that you're not leaving any money left on the table. So if you do have to if you do end up having to take out student loans, let's look into sort of what are the steps before you borrow, before you end up accepting and taking on that financial burden. The first step is just making sure that you're completing your FAFSA. You're doing that every year. You're making sure that you're mitigating the costs as much as possible. After that, then it's time to start talking to your family, talking with your parental, talking with your family and making sure that you're factoring in family support. You're talking with them, making sure that you guys are on the same page. Y'all are on the same page of, okay, this is how much this is going to cost. Will you help me with this regard? How much was the expected family contribution? How much will I have to take on in advance, or how much will I have to take on later? So after completing your FAFSA, once you've talked with your family and making sure that you're on the same page with them, making sure that you know what your responsibilities are, what their responsibilities are, then it's going to go back to mitigating that cost, mitigating how much college is going to cost you. So that's when you look at your college website, you look at the scholarships that are available specifically for you in your college for your major. You start looking at external directories like FastWeb and other resources, making sure that you're mitigating as much as possible, checking in with community groups near you to see if, oh, is there any scholarships or grants available that I could apply for, that I could do? Making sure that you're mitigating the costs as much as possible before you end up looking at student loans. But if that ends up being a factor for you, that's when you start trying to figure out, okay, what type of loan do I take? What are the best options for me? And what can I really do? So here are sort of the main 2 categories of student loans, that being federal and private. So the main difference here is just one of them. The one to start with is usually federal loans, as these are government issued, they have lower interest rates. You can end up having a lot more variety in how to pay that back. You have various loan forgiveness programs, you have various different repayment plans, and it's overall a lot more flexible than that of private loans, as we can't really speak on them as their rules and regulations, everything are private. Everything is done by the loan servicer and everything along those lines. But in general, they typically have a higher interest rate. They're not subsidized, which just means that they're accruing interest as soon as you take them out. So for a student loan that was subsidized, this just means that you won't have to end up paying any interest on that loan until you graduate. In addition to that, you don't have to file any credit check or cosigners for a federal loan, and you don't have as many options. So that's why it's so important to look and start with federal loans and start maximizing the use of that as much as possible. So that way you don't have to end up dealing with private loans and having to go through a completely separate system where you don't have as many options. So now let's start looking into steps for financial aid. One of them is just here's the general timeline of everything else to make sure that you're going step by step and you're going, okay, I did that. So here's sort of the general guideline to see if so the first one is just making sure that you're submitting your FAFSA, making sure that you're getting that done at the latest by December 1st, making sure that that's done and dusted with. So that way you're giving yourself the highest chance to mitigate that cost. After that, in February and April, for new students here at Penn State, your financial aid package will then become available online path. Then through May and August, that your financial aid packages will become available to you. So that's when you start talking with your family again and going, okay, is this something that I can take on? Is this something that I need to take on? And if you accept completing all the paperwork necessary, whether it be the entrance counseling, the promissory note, making sure that if you do accept it, you know the risks and responsibilities associated with that. In addition, parents can also apply for a Parent Plus loan, which we will talk about later on in the presentation. So after you do that, after you've completed your FAFSA, you've gotten your financial aid package, then in August and September, that's when the bills become available and they're due by the end of August. So make sure that you know who's paying that, know what you're paying, make sure that you know what entity you are paying to. and make sure that make sure that everything you know is available and ready. So that way you're not blindsided when the time comes to start paying that off. So now let's go into sort of more in depth to what the specific types of federal loans are and sort of what are your various options in the federal sense directly. So your first option is direct subsidized loans. These are what I was talking about earlier with the difference in the ones where the interest does not accrue while you are at college and studying. This is the best type of a federal loan to get just to start off, as it's available to undergrad students. Their interest rate is fixed, and that there is some limiting factors. The loan limit for dependent students is $23,000, but the best part of this loan is it being subsidized and the government paying off that interest for you. The next one is direct unsubsidized loans. These are available to undergrads, graduates, and professional students. So as similar to that of the direct subsidized, it has a fixed interest rate. The loan limit is $8,000 for dependent students, but the difference primarily is just that of interest accruing when you take out that student loan. So if you take it out in sophomore year, you'll have to start, the interest will begin accruing for that. Allie, you know. So moving on past that, we have the Parent Plus loans.
Oops, sorry.
Sorry. We have Parent Plus loans that are available to parents. These are typically done for dependents and children. Basically, that's how it's marketed, and then you'll be gaining fixed interest loans. And again, the loan limit is just the cost of attendance minus any other financial aid that you would have. Grad Plus loans are very similar to that of Parent Plus loans in the loan limit aspect, where they basically just, the loan limit is just your cost of attendance minus any other financial aid that you have. And this is available to any student past undergrad. So if you're going to graduate or professional student, if you're going to pursue anything past an undergraduate degree, this is a fantastic option for you. So then I'll turn it over to Allie to go more in depth on the more specifics and nitty gritty of everything else.
Absolutely. So let's look into each of these loan types and how much can be borrowed. There are two different types of loan limits that we're going to talk about: annual loan limits and aggregate loan limits. So the annual loan limit is how much can be borrowed each year, and the amount is going to differ based on what credit year you actually are. So whether you are a freshman, a sophomore, a junior, senior, and also what type of student you are. So we talked about this a little bit. So you can see across the top of our chart here, we have dependent undergraduate students, dependent undergraduate students with a Parent Plus loan denial, independent undergraduate students, and graduate and professional degree students. And so I want to quickly touch on the second one, in the dependent undergraduate student with a Parent Plus loan denial. So as Carlo mentioned and explained already, we know a Parent Plus loan is taken out by the parents of a student, but if parents are denied for this loan, the student will be offered additional federal funds. And if you look at this chart, it's actually the same amount as that of an independent undergraduate student. So let's kind of quickly go over this here. If you're an undergraduate student, you are one of these three in the red box. So you can kind of hone in on this and think about which one of these might apply to you. But for a dependent undergraduate student, you can borrow a max of $5,500 in your first year of college. Of course, that will be split between 2 semesters, right? No more of $3,500 of that can be subsidized. And we know, based on what Carlo already said, subsidized loans don't gain interest in college, while unsubsidized loans do. So when we're taking out federal student loans, if we need to do that, we definitely want to be focusing on subsidized loans first, and then utilizing unsubsidized loans. So take a look at the second year. The annual loan limit goes up to $6,500, and $4,500 of that can be subsidized. The third to fifth years in college, this goes up even more. $7,500 can be borrowed, and $5,500 of that can be subsidized. Take a look over the annual limits for the other types of undergraduate students. For dependent undergrads with a Parent Plus loan denial and independent undergraduate students, more can be borrowed each year. The annual loan limit is higher. For graduate and professional degree students, it's considerably higher each year because their programs typically are a little bit more expensive. So we talked about annual loan limits, but there's also aggregate loan limits, which is just your career maximum loan amount. So that's the money or the amount that you're going to be seeing across the bottom of the chart here. This is the total amount of money you're able to borrow over the course of your education. The important takeaway with your aggregate loan amount is that if your total loan amount you've received over the course of your education reaches this aggregate loan limit, you won't be able to receive any more federal funds under the umbrella that you're seeing here. So in the time that you're a dependent undergraduate student. If you move to a graduate or professional student, of course, that changes. It is also important to point out here that your total student aid package each year, so thinking about all the things that Carlo has mentioned already, your grants, your scholarships, your federal and private loans cannot exceed your cost of attendance. Your total cost of attendance is the cost of everything related to getting an education. So it's your tuition, your room and board, your books, your living expenses, everything. And so, for example, in 2023, for a dependent in-state student coming to University Park living on campus, the cost of attendance is about $35,000 yearly. So any aid that this student gets via grants or scholarships or loans actually cannot exceed that number. When borrowing federal student aid, it's important to be aware of satisfactory academic progress and how it can affect you and your student aid. Satisfactory academic progress is the process that we use to determine if a student is meeting all of his or her educational requirements and is on target to graduate on time with a degree or certificate. You have to keep satisfactory academic progress to avoid losing your federal aid. So in order to do this, you need to maintain a GPA above 2.0, pass and finish at least 67% of the classes that you start, and finish your degree in the allotted amount of time. So this is something to consider if you're even maybe thinking of late dropping a class. Before you do that, you need to make sure you're still going to be in good standing with your satisfactory academic progress, and that dropping that class wouldn't take you down to under that 67% threshold. And so if you're thinking about that, you should definitely talk with financial aid before late dropping that class, just to make sure you're still in good standing. The Office of Student Aid will notify you if you're not meeting satisfactory academic progress. Look out for any and all emails from them because they are probably important. Even if they're not about satisfactory academic progress, they probably are still important. If you are close to reaching your aggregate student loan limit, which we talked about just a minute ago, that is the total amount of money that you can borrow for your federal money that you can borrow for your education, they will also notify you of that via email. So the first half of our webinar really focused on borrowing student loans. In the second half, we're going to discuss repayment and the various ways to get rid of your student loans. So this is kind of the big question, right? I got these things out, I paid for my education. Now, how do I get rid of these? So there are 4 ways we can get rid of student loans. You can repay them, you can work towards forgiveness, they can be discharged, or they can be canceled. A majority of people who take out student loans will probably repay at least a portion of them. During repayment, the borrower will repay their student loans through one of the repayment plans. What we have on the screen here isn't actually all of them. We're going to talk about them in a little bit more depth in a few slides. So one thing that you can do in terms of repayment is you can also ask your employer, your future employer, if they can assist you at all in repayment. I've met with some graduating seniors whose employers whose employers actually paid some of their student loans as part of their benefits package. So that is a fantastic thing. Next, we have forgiveness, and there are a few different kinds of forgiveness out there. Public service loan forgiveness is probably the one that you might think of when you hear of forgiveness. I think it's one of the most popular options for student loan forgiveness out there. Public service loan forgiveness serves as an incentive to work in the public sector, because recent graduates who graduate and go into the public sector might be making a little bit less money than they would if they went into a private sector. So that's kind of the idea behind the public service loan forgiveness. So to qualify, you have to make 10 years of qualifying payments under a qualified employer. So a qualified employer would be one in the public sector. After those 10 years of payments, the remaining balance of your loan will be forgiven under the public service loan forgiveness program. There's also something called teacher loan forgiveness. This forgives a set amount for teaching at an eligible school. This can forgive up to $17,500 for teachers. There's also Perkins loan forgiveness. This deals with the federal Perkins loan program specifically. The Perkins loan program disbursements ended in 2018, so the use of this program will also likely become more rare as we move forward, further away from when those loans were last dispersed. This is also for teachers in low-income schools. There is also income-driven repayment forgiveness, and this will forgive any remaining loan balance if your loans paid under the income-driven repayment plan aren't fully repaid by the end of the repayment period, which is 20 or 25 years. So we're going to talk more about that one specifically when we talk about the different repayment plans as well. I do want to mention, when it comes to loan forgiveness, these different programs, they can get kind of complicated and dicey. They are very specific, and you have to make sure you're doing very specific things in order to receive forgiveness. And so if you think you might want to pursue one of these after graduation, or you might be eligible because maybe you're thinking of, being a teacher in a low income school district or working in the public sector, we definitely encourage you to make a one-on-one appointment so we can talk through those details and nothing gets missed. Next, we have discharge. Your loans may also be discharged. This is probably the most rare of these 4 different options here. When loans are discharged, you don't have to pay the remaining balance in some cases. I used to joke and say, the only way your student loans are going to go away is if you die. And that's kind of true. Student loan debt does not pass on if the borrower passes away. So that is one way to get rid of your student loans. Also, in the case of a disability that prevents you from earning money for 5 or more years, or a disability that will ultimately, a disability or illness that will ultimately result in death, is cause for discharge of your student loans as well. Loans may be discharged if you file for bankruptcy, but you have to file an additional adversary proceeding. So filing bankruptcy will not automatically discharge your student loans. So you shouldn't file for bankruptcy if your student loan debt is your only debt, because it might not even go away. There is something called the borrower defense discharge. This is for borrowers who were defrauded by their schools, or if their schools closed before they could finish their degree. There's also forgery discharge if forgery by the school or individual who is borrowing loans occurs, and they would find this through the loan application or the promissory note. So talking about all of these things, loan discharge can be rare, right? Lastly, we have student loan debt cancellation. And of course, we have to talk about the Biden-Harris debt relief plan. This has the potential to provide $10,000 to $20,000 of potential loan cancellation for borrowers. Now, this is currently in litigation, and they do hope to have some sort of answer before June 30th of this year. But it's kind of hard to say at this point what the end goal or what the end result of the Biden-Harris debt relief plan is going to be. We all have our fingers crossed, right? There's also borrower defense to repayment, and this is actually the same as borrower defense to discharge. This happens in the case where a school defrauds a borrower. If you think about the example with ITT Tech, those students who went there and took out student loans had their student loans canceled because they were defrauded by their school. So not necessarily something we want to happen, right? I did say this earlier. Sometimes employers will offer to make payments towards your student loans or help you out with your student loans as part of their benefits package. So if student loans are a big stress weighing heavy on your shoulders, that's something you can ask your employer about. So like I said earlier, most of us will repay at least a portion of our student loans, if not all of them. So there are a few things that you need to know about repayment. The first is regarding your grace period. For your federal student loans, your grace period is a period of time where your payments aren't due. So after you graduate, you get a grace period of 6 months on your federal student loans before you're required to start making payments. The idea of this is that they want to give you some time after graduation to get a job and get on your feet before loan repayment officially starts. And the good news is that if you have subsidized loans, those won't accrue interest at this time. However, your unsubsidized loans will. You can start making payments during your grace period, and we do suggest it if you're able, but it's not required. Of course, we're talking about federal loans here, so private student loans may or may not have a grace period. You'll have to check with your private loan servicer on that if you do have private student loans. Speaking of your loan servicer, your federal loan servicer will basically act as the middleman between you and the government. Your federal loan servicer is just a company that is assigned by studentaid.gov to handle the billing and other loan servicing issues on their behalf. So this is who you'll actually pay when you go back to pay your student loans. You can find who your loan servicer is by logging into studentaid.gov and looking at the dashboard. Your repayment plan will kind of guide how you pay your loans back. And like I said, we'll look more at repayment plans in a few slides. You can actually change your repayment plan for any time for free if you get into a repayment plan and find out that it's not working for you and you need to change your payment, maybe go into an income-based plan for a lesser payment. You do have that option. Studentaid.gov has a loan simulator that's a fantastic tool. It will help you see what repayment could look like for you based on how much you've already borrowed, and it can actually help you simulate what repayment might look like once you finished your degree and you're done borrowing money. It will also kind of show you what the different repayment options are and how those might apply to you in your future financial situation. So I would suggest each and every semester after borrowing more money to pay for your education that year, or that semester rather, to go to this loan simulator and check and see how your repayment has changed. This can be a really good way to stay on top of your student loans so you aren't flabbergasted when you graduate and look at your monthly payment. Like I said earlier, knowledge is power. The more you know about your situation, the more you can do to stay in control of it. This also could be a great tool to help you get an idea of what your after graduation budget might look like. So we definitely encourage you to check out this loan simulator on studentaid.gov. So after you get your first loan, you will get a loan servicer. If you have federal student aid already, if you've taken loans out in the past, you do have one of these. So you should know who it is. Like I said a few seconds ago, you can log into studentaid.gov and view your dashboard to figure out which one of these companies is your federal loan servicer. And we also want to highlight, people are getting really good at scamming these days, unfortunately. So we wanted to just share a few ways that you can avoid scams when it comes to your student loans and communicating with your loan servicer. First of all, you never need to pay for help with your student loans. If someone is asking you to make payments of any kind in order to help you figure out your loans, that is a scam. Don't do that. You never have to pay for help with your student loans. Also, a good rule of thumb is to save your loan servicer's email and mark them as important. Personally, I prefer to click a link from a saved email so I know I'm going directly to my loan servicer's site. Scammers are getting really good at making fake websites and even fake emails. So this is a good way to ensure you're always going to your loan servicer's site and not a scammer posing as your servicer. And of course, never share your FSA ID with anyone. That is information for you and you only you should be able to log into your federal student aid account. So let's talk a little bit more in depth about the different federal loan repayment plans that exist for you to choose from after graduation. We have some options on the screen here. The standard plan is the default plan. If you don't make a decision on which plan to enter into after graduation, this is the plan that you'll be in, the standard plan. If you select and follow this plan, you will pay off your loans in 10 years with equal monthly payments each month. So at the end of 10 years, your loans will be down to zero. The amount that you pay is obviously based on what you owe. If you have a higher loan balance, these payments might not be super affordable right out of college. So there is also the graduated option. With this option, your loans will also be down to zero in 10 years. They'll be paid off, but your payments will start lower and they'll increase over the 10-year repayment period. The graduated plan could be a good option for someone who has a lower salary right out of college, but knows they'll be making a bit more later down the line. There are extended options for both the standard and graduated plan where payments can be stretched over 25 years. This can help keep your monthly payments lower, but remember, the longer you stretch out your repayment, the more interest you'll pay over the life of the loan. So the options in the red box will repay your loans in a set number of years. There are also income-driven repayment plans where the payment isn't based on the amount that you owe, but it's based on your income. Income-based plans ensure that you have an affordable payment, which is a positive thing. But under an income-based repayment plan, your loans could be growing instead of shrinking if your monthly payment isn't covering the interest that's accruing. So if you do need to enter into an income-based plan, definitely check on this. Check and look to see how much interest is accruing each month on your loans versus how much of that you're actually covering with your monthly payment. There are a few different types of income-based plans. They all have different formulas that will determine what the monthly payment is. It is typically based on your income and your family size. Typically, these plans each have a set amount of time that you will make payments, usually 20 or 25 years, and then the remainder of what's left after you've paid for that set amount of time is forgiven. So we talked about that under our forgiveness bubble, the income-based repayment plan forgiveness. That's what we're talking about here. You do have to make those payments for 20 or 25 years, and then the remainder at that time, at the end of that time period, can be forgiven. For public service loan forgiveness, we talked about the fact that you have to enroll in a qualifying repayment plan under a qualifying employer. So qualifying repayment plans for public service loan forgiveness are these: the revised pay-as-you-earn plan, the pay-as-you-earn plan, the income-based repayment plan, and the income contingent repayment plan. For public service loan forgiveness, you have to be on one of these income-driven repayment plans, because if you select The standard or graduated plan, your loans will be paid off at the end of 10 years and there will be nothing left to forgive. So that's something to keep in mind. The takeaway here is that you have options when it comes to student loan repayment. There are a variety of different federal loan repayment plans that can work depending on your situation. You can work these into your financial plan for future financial success. So when it comes to your repayment in general, it is important to pay the amount shown on your bill and to pay by the due date. If not, you risk going into default. So the first day after you miss a student loan payment, you won't go into default, but your loan will become past due or delinquent. Your loan account will remain delinquent until you repay the past due amount or make other arrangements, such as going into deferment or forbearance, which we'll talk about in a second, or changing repayment plans. If you are delinquent on your student loan payment for 90 days or more, your loan servicer will report the delinquency to the 3 major credit bureaus. It will affect your credit score. And then after 270 days of inaction, your loan will enter default. Defaulting on your loan can have serious consequences like we see on the screen here. You can lose eligibility for your federal student aid, your wages may be garnished, tax refunds and federal benefit payments can be withheld, and more. So this is not a good thing. We do not want to find ourselves in default. If you do, one way to get out of default is to pay the defaulted loan in full, but most of us can't do that, right? That's why we have student loans in the first place. The 2 more realistic ways to get out of default are through rehabilitating your loan or consolidating your loan. They both work a little differently, but will both get you out of default. And without going in the weeds too much here, I'll just kind of explain the gist of both. And hopefully you never have to remember this information, right? So loan rehabilitation takes several months to complete. If you successfully complete the terms of your rehabilitation agreement, the default status will be removed from your loan and your credit report. So this can actually help fix your credit score as well. You could also choose to consolidate your federal loans, which could extend your repayment term up to 30 years. But taking this option will remove the default status from your loan, but it will remain on your credit report. So like I said, hopefully we never get here. If you've missed a payment or find yourself having trouble making payments, immediately contact your loan servicer and discuss options to avoid defaulting on your loan. 270 days is a very long time, and it's a long enough time for you to take action to avoid finding yourself in this situation. So we mentioned this earlier. To avoid going into default, there are options. There's deferment and forbearance. These options may become available to you if you become unemployed or ill, or find yourself in a financial hardship. You might be able to utilize a deferment or forbearance for a temporary period of time until you get yourself out of that situation. Both of these things, deferment and forbearance, will allow you to temporarily postpone or reduce your federal student loan payments. The main difference with these 2 is if you are in deferment, no interest will accrue on your loan balance. And when you're in forbearance, interest will accrue on your loan balance. So it's important to know which you've got because like we said earlier, if interest is accruing and we aren't paying for our loans, that balance of our loans will be growing. If you ever can't make a payment, there are options available to you. The worst thing that you can do is ignore it. Reach out to your loan servicer, explain the situation, and have a conversation to avoid going into default. So I do realize that this was a lot of information coming at you about your student loans or maybe your children's student loans, right? So if you're overwhelmed by your loans, or student loans in general and could benefit from some one-on-one guidance, we definitely encourage you to make an appointment with us through Starfish. We would be happy to talk to you about your loans and make a plan for the future. Like Carlo mentioned earlier, we have a variety of other free services to help you on your journey to financial wellness, including group presentations, self-study modules, our mentoring program, and our latest offering, um, workshops. You can find more information about all of these services on our website, which is financialliteracy.psu.edu. So that is all we had for you today. Thank you for attending our webinar. Remember, we are here to help you on your journey to financial wellness.